we've had this year and will continue up until September or October. I am Pablo Medina. I'm the Deputy Global Shelter Cluster Coordinator on behalf of IFRC. And today we're going to discuss and hear about the shelter cluster in Mozambique. The shelter cluster in Mozambique was actually one of the first ever activated clusters. It was activated in 2007 in response to cyclone and floods, and has remained ever since active both in preparedness and response to primarily natural disasters. However, as of 2019, the conflict in the north deteriorated, and it has changed its emphasis from what used to be a primarily natural disaster cluster to a primarily conflict-related cluster. The cluster in Mozambique is co-led by IOM and IFRC, and today we have the Shelter Cluster Coordinator from IOM, Eva Samalea, who will present about the response and the coordination of the response to the conflict in the north primarily. And we also have Hazel Milley, who deployed earlier this year to coordinate the response to the tropical cyclone ELOISE. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Eva. Thank you, Hazel. They will present first, and then we will open for Q&A, but feel free to post questions on the chat. They will answer later on, or otherwise just wait until they finish the presentation to post your questions and comments. Thanks, everyone, again, and over to you, Eva.
Thank you very much, Pablo, for the introduction, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We have here also Hazel. I don't know if Hazel, you would like to, I don't see your camera on. Maybe you would like to introduce yourself before we start sharing the presentation.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Hazel O'Mealy. So I was deployed as Pablo mentioned. I was deployed with the IFRC to the central region during the rainy cyclone season. So from January to April. So I'll just be taking you through kind of that part of the presentation, and any questions on the central region, you can direct them to me after. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Let me share the screen and the camera will stop, but we can go back to the Q&A later. So I don't know if some of you were last year on the presentation. We use the same type of format, and I think that it will help all of you to understand in a timeline the situation in the country from last year, which was in, I think the session one was in October 20. So let's pick up there and go through this timeline, showing you how we have been progressing and what has been the challenges, etc. So as you may be aware, since October 2020, the humanitarian needs escalated significantly from September to November. Actually, in the northern region, due to the insecurity crisis, the people displaced increased from 427 to 600,000, which was a massive increase of humanitarian needs, and considering the lack of resources, it was really challenging. 91% of the displaced population actually reported that shelter was the main need after food, and then NFI is 33%. These reports are being repeated up to now, and shelter remains the second main need reported by the affected population. At that time, in November 2020, the partners' capacity, which was at that time, it was like approximately 12 partners, active partners, was extremely limited, and we were extremely overstretched. Then between November and December 2020, we developed the HRP for 2021 that, as most of you may be aware, was targeting, the shelter cluster is targeting 564,000 people, displaced people. It is just, the HRP is just covering the northern region of Mozambique. So it is the affected area by the insecurity crisis in Cabo Delgado, which means it's Cabo Delgado, Nampula, and Niassa. And over there, we are targeting the 564,000 people. The financial requirements are 28 million. And at that time, in November 2020, when we were preparing the HRP for 2021, the 80% of the displaced population were in host communities, and then the remaining in the 20% in temporary sites, which were like, it's called temporary sites here in Mozambique, but are more schools or communal spaces. Then, of course, considering also at that moment the COVID-19, the lack of access to safe shelter for the displaced population was causing overcrowded, and this, considering COVID-19 plus cholera risk, which is actually it's endemic in the area, was exposing the people to health, to main health issues, especially women and children. The situation continued getting worse and worse, and until in less than 1 month, the displaced population increased another 70,000, up to more 70,000 more. At that period is when we started setting up relocation sites. So relocation sites in this context are resettlement sites, but for IDPs. So as you will later hear about resettlement sites when Hazel talks about the ELOISE response. Resettlement sites are specific for the IDPs affected by the natural disasters, and then the relocation sites are in the northern region for the IDPs, for the people displaced by because of the insecurity crisis. So we started with this. However, we were not able to target the population that was going to be relocated there. Basically, partners were receiving the lists from the government, and then the government was moving the people, and we needed to go and assist. It was very challenging, and since then we started setting up several tools to establish the beneficiary selection criteria, but still up to now, we are struggling to manage to target the most vulnerable and to ensure that it is the relocation is targeting just the most vulnerable. We are here in December 2020, and despite all these challenges that I have been telling you, the shelter cluster partners that at that time were 12, as I said, managed to assist 7,292 households affected by insecurity crisis. So it was a big achievement considering broken bridge, rainy season, and the insecurity by itself. Considering that we didn't have resources at that time, and we had more than 600,000 people displaced, we needed to set up a strategy for shelter assistance that allow us to reach the maximum people possible. Then we reduced the standards of the kits, but trying to optimize the resources and try to optimize with one tarp how many square meters, how much we could assist, how many people could we assist considering the stock that we had in the country. So for the self-recovery, we had the package of basic emergency shelter and NFI kit, which was composed by one tarp and then basic household items, and also supported by some tools in some cases. With this type of assistance at the beginning, and for now, it's also working well in some locations where the community has access to materials. They set up their shelters immediately. However, we know that for this they need some time. So we decided to develop a design that was being able to be erected immediately, and in few hours they could have a shelter. Then we had the shelter type B that can be an upgrade from the shelter type A, and finally an upgrade shelter at the final upgrades with the power peak type of house that maybe you are familiarized with the mat in the walls. And this was the final product that in some locations we will see that it's happening. For that, we will need, of course, time. And why we are actually considering this phase approach is because in this context, we are not talking, well, in some locations, the people are not expected to stay, so maybe they will not receive these plots, and we are providing them emergency shelter assistance. But in most of the cases, in the relocation sites, the families are receiving plots of 15 by 20 meters, which is not the common scenario in other contexts. With this space, this means that they could set up their emergency shelter immediately, being relocated in their plots, and slowly being upgrading their shelter. Either if they receive the materials, or if they collect, or based on their capacity, they will upgrade it. But the main point here is that they can be settled in their plots, start working in their little gardening, because some of them have set up some small garden in there, and then also their family toilet, etc. So this is actually a picture in Mekulane, in Chiuri, where you can see both the emergency shelter was adapted in this context, and it's a little bit more curved, and it's the one with the tarp. Then they upgraded a little bit and increased the size, and then finally they have set up the more permanent or semi-permanent shelter with the PAO-EPIC technique. This was, we were in December 2020, right? And I don't know if you remember, but this was even before, like 3 months before the PALMA crisis, the PALMA attacks. But at that time, we were already struggling to reach PALMA to provide assistance. We knew that there was a lot of vulnerable population, displaced population. So we started setting up the modality of survival kits within the cluster, also in coordination with other sectors. And at that time, in December 2020, we managed to assist 146 households in PALMA. And here we are in December with Hazel, with CHALANE in the central region.
Hi, everyone. So meanwhile, in December in the central region, so the first was Storm CHALANE, which hit on the 30th of December. And just to kind of remind everyone of the context, so 2019, Cyclone Idai, there are still like almost 100,000 people living in the Cyclone Idai resettlement sites across the central region. Yeah, the next slide, Eva. And this is just, sorry, it's a little bit small, but just to give you an idea. So then on the 23rd of January, Cyclone ELOISE hit, and you'll see the three cyclones. So you can see CHALANE, Idai, and ELOISE, and more or less they're sort of affecting the same part of Mozambique. And considering the almost 100,000 people who are in the resettlement sites since Idai. So that will just kind of give you an idea. So the next slide, sorry, Eva. Yeah, so this is a photo from Buzi, which was one of the most affected areas. So the impact of Cyclone ELOISE, it affected 86,412 families. That's an estimation from the government, from INGD, which equates to about 440,000 families. That's not shelter only, that's also affected by their agriculture or other sectors. And it affected Zambezia, Sofala, Manica, Nyambane, and Gaza. And I think at the end, we'll be able to see a map so you get a better idea. Yeah, next slide, please, Eva. And just to kind of, yeah, the immediate response to ELOISE, which was like in February, early February this year, was the use of the 2020 pre-positioned family tents. So this is a photo here from Buzi, where an accommodation center is, they kind of created like accommodation center overflow areas with these family tents. To decongest the accommodation centers. So there were 10 people per tent, so 5 on each side. Although it's not ideal for COVID, it's still better than people sleeping outside, of course, in open air. And also, given the fact that a lot of partners didn't have stocks ready, they didn't have shelter kits, so it kind of bought I guess we could say it kind of bought partners some time to get funding, procure the material, and also for INGD and the government to prepare the resettlement sites, because the thing is that, like, when ELOISE and CHALANE hit, it was kind of known that there would be like a lot of displacement, which turned out to be the case, but there was no place for them to resettle. So all of that clearing, site planning actually had to happen after the emergency. So yeah, we needed to kind of buy ourselves some time. So this was a really rapid response, I thought. Yeah, if you go ahead, Eva. And then this is just to kind of give you an idea comparing IDAI with ELOISE and CHALANE. So Cyclone ELOISE actually necessitated the creation of 5 new resettlement sites and the extension of 8 existing resettlement sites, with plots for over 6,000 families, which is an increase of 35% from Cyclone IDAI. So that's it was quite a big increase, and yeah. If you want to go on to the next slide, Eva, and I'll explain further. And that image you see there is just from like site planning, yeah. So which had to be done in like during the emergency. And then this little graph here, it's a little bit blurry right now for some reason. So you can see there the star on the left. That's when Cyclone ELOISE hit. And then you can see on the top, we had accommodation centers activated in Machazi, Mashanga, Mosorize, Nyamatanda, like a lot of different areas, but they kind of quickly closed and people were able to go home. And similarly in Beira, that was the original attention was on Beira, but after a few weeks, similarly, those people went home. We only had to, they needed relocation of 80 families. And then it was very apparent kind of at that point, it's sort of mid-February, that the center of the Cyclone ELOISE impact was in Buzi. And yeah, so you can see there that we had to coordinated with the partners, with the government to deactivate the accommodation centers or decongest the family tents to resettle people. So it had to be in a really phased process. And also we tried to, some partners had already, like we had, yeah, some organizations had already their own NFI kits, so we had to kind of try and find a balance of how do we make this fair across, across the resettlements. And I think that aspect of the response was quite successful. And we relocated all of the families in Buzi to new plots. If you want to go ahead, Eva. So yeah, this is just the last slide on that, and just to kind of give an overview and sort of some gaps in general in the central region. So the 11 partners that responded to Cyclone CHALANE and ELOISE reached 13,000 families with emergency shelter and NFIs. And as I said, the priority was to deactivate the accommodation centers, which we successfully managed to do. In spite of all the coordination issues, the lack of notice from the government and all of that. However, we were unable to assist those in existing resettlement sites who were affected. So the 8,755, this is DTM figures, who are across the existing resettlement sites. We had some partners who gave some assistance, but generally, there are still families living in tarps and emergency shelters from IDAI. And similarly, outside of resettlement sites, for the lack of information, the lack of capacity from partners, we did not, the ELOISE response did not consist of very little response outside of resettlement sites, even though we had reports of 50,000 households affected outside. And also, I would just say, kind of the central region, I guess the concern would be the pre-positioning for 2022 rainy season, and the high numbers of families who are still in emergency shelter, like since 2019 Cyclone Idai. Then with each year, even the 2020 floods created extensions of resettlement sites, and now again Cyclone ELOISE, CHALANE. Every year, the resettlement sites are increasing, but the capacity of organizations, the government, the families themselves to self-recover or to get to some kind of transitional or permanent shelter is not able to keep up. So it's just creeping every year. The needs are increasing, and they're just kind of culminating, kind of on top. 1 year on year, it's compounding the impact. So yeah, that's kind of just an overview of the Cyclone ELOISE response. As I said, a good response in terms of the newly displaced, at least with emergency shelter kits and NFIs, but huge gaps in terms of pre-positioning for next year in terms of the existing resettlement sites and outside of resettlement sites. So I'll pass you to Eva now for the floods in Cabo Delgado, March 2021. We're still in March. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hazel. So yes, here we are back in March, and in the meanwhile, while ELOISE, CHALANE, ELOISE happened, the rainy season in the northern region also affected some areas and there were some floods in this picture that you can see very blurry, but it's because this was a video and it was very in a very critical situation. When was it taken? This is 25 de Junio. It's actually one of the biggest sites there. It is a temporary site. Currently, we have more than 6,000 families there, and there were more than 200 households affected by the floods. Currently, we are actually working on the relocation of the families in this flooded area, but at that time, the frustration of all partners was huge. So we had all the challenges, all the insecurity crisis, all the displaced population, and then the floods in some of the areas, and we couldn't assist. Nobody had the stocks were really limited. The procurement process was taking super long. The items were stuck in customs. Then some trucks stopped in the border due to the floods, due to the rainy season. They couldn't come, so we couldn't assist, and we knew that this was extremely. We really needed to do something, and we couldn't do that. Then, in parallel, as we were, there was the capacity of the partners since last year. It was quite limited, and also considering the experience that was in country from this type of humanitarian crisis, we found that we needed to develop, and as I said, especially to improve the beneficiary selection criteria process. We developed some tools for the assessment using a scorecard, and then also we provided in March, finally, we could provide some training for partners with practical exercises, carrying the assessments together with them and collecting this information. This is to avoid, this was also involving the local authorities, so we could avoid blanket distribution as much as possible, which is what is happening in most of the cases, because still the distribution list, we are not allowed to actually prepare the distribution list by ourselves. We are receiving them from local authorities, and we can just verify and proceed. But still, the data is not accurate, and we are really it's a main challenge for all the sectors, not just shelter. But so far, we provided this training, and the capacity is being increased. And then the 27th of March, we had the PALMA attacks. This is when the crisis escalated significantly, and you are all aware of that, I'm sure. The number of displaced people multiplied every day, and it keeps growing. From that attack in April 2020, that was a SERF rapid response call, and for the PALMA crisis, and Shelter Cluster received a total of $925,000 USD, which is nothing compared with the needs. but still we could replenish a little bit the stock and target some the most vulnerable IDPs in some of the most affected areas where the most of the people from PALMA were arriving. This is in April 2020. From April 2020, we are working on the assistance for the. We are really we have a part of the cluster is focused on the assistance for the displaced people from PALMA. There is a major attention for that, but still, as I said, the lack of and Hazel was also talking about this issue for ELOISE response. The lack of prepositioning stock or the pipeline system really is limiting the response capacity for the shelter cluster partners. Still, for when the PALMA crisis happened, all partners that had some remaining items in their warehouses, they were doing all the inventory and seeing what was remaining that we can provide to these people. But the number was less than, I think, less than 2,000 households that we could reach at that time. Then, because of that, and also considering that most of the people from PALMA were coming to some other areas by foot that are in hard to reach areas, or by boat, they were reaching they were going to other locations that we could not, they were hard to reach areas, plus they were, most of them were on the move, and depending on the location they want to stay or not. We, together with other sectors, we boost again or took back the discussion on survival kits, and then since then we have developed the SOP with the support of OCHA and in coordination with WASH cluster, health cluster, and the PSE AOR plus food security and livelihood cluster. And we have defined the package, and we are working also in the logistics, how it is going to be implemented, and targeting the people in the hard to reach areas so we can go together and provide this immediate assistance. So yeah, so in this, considering the situation, the catastrophic situation from the beginning, from last year that we have been talking about, plus the crisis in PALMA, as I'm saying, the resources were totally overstretched. The number of displaced people at that time in April reached the 732,230 people. And we were receiving new people every day in the relocation and temporary sites. The stock was still very limited, as I said, because of the delays on the procurement and importation process, and the frustration in the sector increased. Still, we have some good news here, and despite all the challenges, also with the strategy, based on the strategy that we define and the type of kits that we establish, we can see that also this is we are supporting the coping mechanisms of the affected population, and that with this little support in some areas, and just because of the proactiveness of the beneficiaries, then we can see self-recovery situations like this one in the pictures. So these families, for example, this is in Nanjua in Ankwabe, they just received one kit of one tarp with the household items and some tools, and they collected the natural materials and they set up their shelters. And this is becoming a small village, definitely. Of course, this is not happening everywhere, and this is also, of course, we need to pay a lot of attention to the natural resources, because this is in some areas, and small number of families will not affect the natural resources too much, but we have 730,000 people displaced, and this will require, this can actually deteriorate all the natural environment that can also increase the exposure to natural hazards. But in any case, as he is in this picture, which is very, very funny, how the they are trying to cope, and how they want to go. The people in the sites, this is in particular in one of the temporary sites that I was talking before, that has 60,000 families, that they are extremely congested, but they are trying to get extra space with natural materials that they are collecting, and because they were supposed to be relocated somewhere else, but this relocation process is not happening, and we are waiting for more than 5 months, they decide to extend it. Actually, now the shelter cluster is working, the partners are working on the upgrades of these shelters, the improvement, but just emergency shelters. We have also this type of improvement made by the affected population, where if they have more resources, or if they, maybe some families also decide to be together, and they extend their shelters with another tarp. Also, some of these cases, most probably the resources that they get is because there are cases of duplication in the list. So families that are twice in the list, so they maybe get two tarps, and then they can extend the shelter. But here you can see, this is the picture. And when I was explaining the phased approach, I was taking a picture where you could see the emergency shelter and the upgrade of the emergency shelter plus the final semi-permanent shelter. And this is in Mekulani again, in Chiuri, and with just some resources available and technical guidance, they can upgrade it. However, this requires time, and it is a big challenge because, as you know, for this type of reconstruction and activities, you need a lot of mobilization, and people need to come back to their livelihood activities. And if they have an emergency shelter, they most probably will not invest the energy in build the improved shelter. But so far, the partners are working on strategies and mobilization of the community, and the progress is going on, and we can see shelters being built, permanent shelters. Also here we have the same situation that I was showing you before, where the families with just a small kid can build up themselves with small support, but again, awareness on the proper use of the natural resources is required. Otherwise, we will have deforested Mozambique in the northern region. And with all these small villages being set up and sites, what about HLP? And this is an issue in this context. I'm not sure if some of you are familiarized, but in Mozambique, people cannot own the land. It's the government who owns the land, and people can just can get a permit, which is called DUAT, to use the land and build their house. This, of course, for this, CCCM is the focal point at this time, and Shelter Cluster and CCCM Cluster are working together. But because of this situation, we decided to call for help and ask support for some training for the partners. So Global Shelter Cluster expert and NRC expert, who is in the country and who may be in the call, provided some training for the partners. And actually, this was a virtual training of 2 sessions, and then for CCCM and Shelter partners. And the next month, we hope that we could do a training in person. And now, if we go back and we check for 2021, how many people have we reached, considering our target from the HRP in the northern region, we can see that we have reached just the 30% of the HRP target with emergency shelter, and NFA actually is the same, but I'm showing you the emergency shelter. Just by 15 partners. This is with very basic assistance, and as we all know, this very basic assistance with emergency shelter is not sustainable. If after 6 to 12 months, plastic sheets will need to be probably replaced. depending on the type of aggregate that the shelter have gotten. We are mobilizing for that, but still it's very challenging, and the most of the people are in very basic emergency shelters that really need upgrades and improvements. And this is happening now. 30 people reach with these emergency shelters, and the rainy season is coming in a few months, and also the cyclone season at the same time. So what are the needs? The shelter cluster presented them together for not just for the northern region, also for the central region. We did in the HRP, as I expressed before, we are targeting 564,000 people, which financial requirements are 28 million. And for the preparedness plans, which is including also the rest of the country, the most exposed areas to natural hazards, we were targeting, in the plan, we are targeting 600,000 people, and the financial requirements are 49 million. This is what we required for 2021, and we have just gotten 10 million. Actually, none of the HRP projects have been funding. It's other type of projects, and 10 million is, we are already in July, the rainy season is coming, and just 2 million of USD has been allocated to the shelter cluster. So considering this situation and that the need of preposition stock, not just, we are now setting up this for the northern region, but it is required for, in general, we can see this need, and this is where the preparedness plan came in with that requirement. The need of a preposition stock in a country where we have an insecurity crisis, plus natural disasters almost every year, and we don't have stock in the country, plus the importation challenges, the procurement challenges. So without preposition stock that can be a pipeline system, it is extremely difficult. And we really need that, and we have been working on this for the northern region, but still it's very, very limited. Right now, we are actually on the process of getting the 950,000 USD from the self-underfunded, and this will support this is actually focused on the support of the setting up of the pipeline system, which will be for prepositioning, but also for, of course, supporting that, which means that it's going to be available for all partners, and this will at least increase the capacity for basic emergency shelter and NFI assistance, and also for survival kits, which is also one of the main gaps currently, and considering the hard to reach areas, that the number of people that are in hard to reach areas or in the move. This system is, we have been working on the system, and it's going live very soon. Yesterday we did the training for the partners. It will be an online platform that will optimize the process, and actually it is totally transparent. Dashboards will be showing where the items are going, and partners can have an updated information on a daily basis of every time that the items are released. And finishing with the coordination needs, that actually also we have needs as coordination, as shelter cluster coordination team. As I expressed, and then it's not something new, but in this context, and we have been taking it as a strength at some point, but also there is we need real support for partners who are coming from other type of experience, not this type of, especially in the northern region, not from insecurity crisis. They need a lot of support, guidance, and with the limited team that it's in the country, it's extremely challenging to mentor actually everyone. So this coordination system that is available is adequate for a smaller response, but this is not a smaller response anymore. We have two types of crises, and we really are struggling with the capacity that we have currently. We really need national shelter cluster support, dedicated preparedness support, and also shelter cluster focal points in the districts that we don't have, and shelter cluster coordination teams from NGO that we don't have neither. So this is the conclusion, and thank you very much. This is time for questions. Thanks. I'm gonna stop sharing the screen and then open the floor. I see that in the chat box there were some questions or comments maybe.
I haven't seen Eva. This is Pablo. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Just a quick question. Mozambique is one of the clusters that is co-led by two agencies. From your perspective, both for you, Eva, and for you, Hazel, how does that co-leadership work, or what are the key elements that are necessary for co-led clusters to work or to be effective? Thank you.
Well, Hazel came in very shortly. But it was lovely to have some support and some in this co-leadership. But currently, she left as the ELOISE response was deactivated. So the shelter cluster was deactivated in the central region, and it's just active in the northern region. So it is co-led by IFRC and IOM, yes. And what is needed, we need more presence. I don't know if you would like to add anything, Hazel, but we need more human resources also in this, in terms of coordination team.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think when we did work together, it was really useful because you had the kind of northern region perspective, and then we had more information on the central region, which like for the preparedness plan, even for the SURFs, when we worked together, I thought it was really good. And even like we had opportunities, for example, when we didn't have any tarps, there was a point where we didn't have any tarps, and Eva organized that we could get some tarps sent down. So I think, treating it as two different responses completely isolated didn't work. I know that during IDIA and Kenneth, which I also worked, it was a little bit like that. But I don't think that's helpful to Mozambique. And I think just for advocacy and everything, I think it's great to work together. I don't know. Is that what your question is, Pablo?
Yes, it was just for me, some of the apologies for the background noise, but for me, one of the key elements is a clear division of roles and responsibilities, to have very clearly defined when the cluster is co-led, who is in charge of what. I think that's relatively easy for Mozambique in that there is a clear division between conflict and natural disasters, but it's not always the case. I've got another question actually. Oh, but I don't know, Eva, you have a comment?
No, yeah, I wanted just to add that it's helpful at some point, but also we had floods in the northern region in the insecurity crisis, and we are exposed in the northern region also. It is exposed. And for example, I remember when Hazel was there for ELOISE, Zambezia was one province that was actually targeted by both regions, because we had IDPs from the insecurity crisis in the northern region of Zambezia, and also affected population from Cyclone ELOISE, and it was a bit difficult to separate it. From which cluster will take responsibility on this context. So it is lovely, and it is helpful to have the two expertises and support in the cluster from the two organizations and focus, and knowing who can support on which on each situation. But it really needs to be maybe there needs to be also a structure, a global structure, a national structure that also merge the two together maybe. And this was missing, so we were doing our best and coordinating each other very, very well. But we were missing that, I think, maybe, no? Someone who had the overall overview of the situation, which we were attending actually the national ICCGs. We were both there, but Hazel was not following. We were actually the backup for each area, but when we need to work on, we on strategic documents, you need someone who has the entire overview of the situation of the country, not separated. And this is not happening currently. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I think Brett has his hand up. Brett, go ahead.
Thank you, Pablo. Thank you, Eva and Hazel. It's really nice to see you online, and thank you for that presentation. That was really thorough, great amount of detailed information, and I think we all really enjoyed the way you put it together. So congratulations to you both. Eva, when you're mentioning about the capacity, I mean it is true of every response, and there's never really the right amount of resources around when you need them at the right time as the situation evolves, especially when you've got different kinds of shelter typologies being implemented. Within the cluster at the global level, there are also deployable resources and capacities as well. So if you do let us know, then we can also, look with partners here as to what you might need, because, Pablo, with both of the grants, we do have additional resources that are coming online. So let us know, especially on the environmental side, on the greening side, on the durable solutions, local approaches, these kinds of things. There might be people that we can send for a month here or month or two here or there for very specific things that you would need done.
Wonderful.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Eva, I'm sorry to. Oh, Joseph, go ahead. Sorry, I just saw your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's just going back to the comments on co-lead of clusters. I think, I mean, my experience is that Mozambique is one of the countries. I mean, there's not a formal MOU, and there have been discussions about it in the past. I think it really comes down to personalities, and I think clearly the two of you get on well, and in this case, it works. And I think from our position and trying to field people to take the cluster roles or co-lead roles, even if you're working on different kind of contexts, it's about as much about finding the right people who get on and can work together as much as institutional agreements. Anyway, that's my feeling. I don't know kind of what your feeling is, Eva and Hazel. I mean, for me, it seems that you both get on personally, and so therefore the institutional problems are really not a problem. You're both focusing on kind of assistance delivery. I don't know what your thoughts are and whether MOUs would help or hinder that process.
Yeah, no, thank you, Joseph. You really capture the reality. Well, I'm lucky enough to say that I just have been working. When I joined the mission, it was Cecilia from IFRC actually leaving, and it was great collaboration working together for just a few weeks when she was still in the country, and then Hazel came in, and it was also we really have the same goal, and we forget about institutions, and we go we focus on the assistance. And this is why, for example, as Hazel said, there was this need that we were totally overstretching the northern region, but there were no TARPs in the central region, and they needed for the activation. And TARPs were very precious at that time, but we mobilized the resources, and we said, okay, please give them some, even if we were receiving orders not to move anything from the northern region, but it was a need. And yeah, definitely it is. It may not be the same situation with other people in co-leadership, but I wish it could be done in the same way that it happened here, because we are, if you are a cluster coordinator, you are really coming for, and it's setting apart personalities. It's this is the way of professionalism. If you are coming as a shelter cluster coordinator, you should set aside that and focus on the main objective and make and do all the best to get along with the person and to work together, because we are working together with all the partners in the country. So this should be the way it's for me. It's the only way that it should happen. But yeah, I know that it's not the same. It's not I know that I am very lucky and that I have been very lucky with Hazel. I don't know, Hazel, if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, no, I mean, the same. I don't know what I can add except to say I've had the same experience with you. And yeah, we're all, I mean, we're all here for the same, as you said, we're all here for the same reason. So yeah, I don't know yeah, I have nothing to add in that way. Don't know if Pablo, if you want to add anything or.
No, it's okay. I think there are many factors and elements that influence whether a co-leadership arrangement works out or not. Indeed, personalities is one of them, but there are many others. I just had another question because we have clusters, other clusters where the cluster approach is fully integrated into the government coordination system, for example, in Indonesia, and other countries where you have parallel coordination systems. One is the international clusters, the other one in Mozambique is the INGC and the government coordination structure. How does that work, that separation, and how do you connect with the government coordination structure? Just to note also that there is a couple of hands up as well, so be brief in your response. Thanks.
Thanks. These change from different regions, actually. The coordination can change. For example, it's INGD, as you mentioned, it was INGC last year. It changed to INGD this year. I think in the central region is very easy to work with them. And in the northern region, depending on the area, actually it is more effective or less. For example, in Nampula, it is very easy. And we are really, we are working together and it's super supportive. However, in Cabo Delgado, where the political structure in the country, it's more, well, in the province, is more complex. We are in the middle of some lack of communication between the different levels there, and this is being affected, actually, our coordination with them. Because it depends on the district, it depends on the people that are the focal points in each district. So it really changed in the region, depending on the area. But in some areas it's working well, and I think in the central region also it was working well, right, with NGD.
Yeah, no, just very quickly, yeah, as you said, like in Sofala, there's some complications, but I think also it was just kind of clarifying with the government representatives, like that, how the cluster works, that, if partners, go and speak to them directly, that then we should be involved, just kind of letting them know and trying to show them that we're here to support them. It's not a power shuffle, like we're not trying to control anything. We're all trying to do the same thing. So I think there was a lot of that, at least in the central region with INGD and Sofala, just to kind of let them know, like, it's not who says, I don't know, it was a little bit complicated. And also some partners felt a little bit disrespected by INGD because they would sort of demand that tomorrow we're going to deactivate, and the partners were like, well, we're not ready, like we need some advance notice. So then it was kind of for me to be kind of a bit diplomatic with INGD and also CCCM, like to kind of give us some notice, like, partners need time to prepare, and just kind of understanding that, also just to manage the expectations of how quick we are able to kind of deactivate accommodation centers. So I think, yeah, just working with INGD, just to let them know what our role is and how we're there to support them. It's not a power struggle. Yeah. Do you want to go to other questions, Eva?
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe add that, it changed also, and maybe also the government, especially in the northern region, where the local authorities in general in Mozambique were used to this coordination mechanism for the natural resources, natural disasters response, but not for insecurity crisis, which was quite too much, I think. And this is why, for example, we are having similar, or the expectations are similar to the early recovery interventions, which are quite difficult in this type of insecurity crisis. So we need to, it's a lot of work on managing expectations, because they don't understand, maybe they are not super familiarized with this type of cluster coordination in security crisis and the type of interventions that need to be done and what are our priorities. So there is a lot of a lot of conversation and communication that need to happen, but it's happening, and as soon as it happens, it's normally they are very reasonable, and if you sit down with them, it's working. But yeah, it's just a matter of communication as anywhere in life.
Sorry, Pablo, I'm not seeing the other hands. Can you, do you mind just calling on someone? I don't know if it's because of the
No,
way
sorry, they were up before. They were up before, but they've lowered the hand now, so I don't know if there are any more questions.
Okay, maybe that question was answered.
Are there any other questions, anyone? Otherwise, I'll close here anyway. We're almost already reached the end of the meeting. So I'll wrap it up. Anyway, you have the contact details of Eva and Hazel in the Mozambique Shelter Cluster website, or also do feel free to reach myself for any additional questions you may have or information. Thank you very much, Eva, and thank you, Hazel. We'll keep in touch. Just to remind everyone that the next country level shelter cluster session will be on Wednesday next week, and it will be Yemen. So we look forward to seeing many of you there again and sharing more experience and lessons from country level shelter clusters. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.